let's just be completely honest here. Right now, you are watching this explainer to actively avoid doing something else, aren't you? Seriously, think about it. Is there an unanswered email, a report you haven't started, some massive stack of reading? Look, don't worry, I'm absolutely not here to judge you. Actually, you are exactly where you need to be right now.
Because the question that haunts, well, literally all of us is this. Why do we consistently choose that paralyzing guilt, that awful stress of delay, over the simple act of just starting? It's a terrible feeling, right? But we repeat the cycle over and over again. Well, today, by digging into some fascinating medical and neuropsychological research, we're going to crack this mystery wide open.
So, let's kick things off with our first major paradigm shift. Number 1, procrastination is not laziness. Seriously, it's not. See, laziness is when you do absolutely nothing and feel perfectly content with that choice. Procrastination, that's almost always accompanied by really intense anxiety. Medical studies, like recent clinical research on adult ADHD, reveal something incredibly validating. Procrastination is actually a recognized neurobiological challenge. It's tied directly to a deficit in what's called executive function. It is not some kind of moral failing, and it's definitely not a lack of willpower. For a lot of people, especially those on the ADHD spectrum, just the inability to initiate a task is a documented neurological hurdle. You can kind of think of your executive functions as your brain's internal project manager. This manager handles all the crucial stuff: planning, organizing, time management, and impulse control. When this system misfires, doing something like breaking down a massive project into bite-sized steps, or even just accurately guessing how long something will take, becomes this monumental barrier. Honestly, telling someone with executive dysfunction to just sit down and do it is literally like asking them to scale a mountain without any gear or a map. The actual mechanism for starting just isn't engaging properly.
All right, moving on to number 2, the dopamine paradox. So if the project manager in your brain is struggling, why can't we just, force ourselves to begin? Well, psychiatrist Sunil Reg explains that procrastinators actually suffer from a chemical timing mismatch. You've probably heard of dopamine. It's the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and reward. Normally, you get a spike of dopamine right at the start of a task, which gives you the chemical fuel to take action. But for chronic procrastinators, this signal is severely delayed. Instead of firing right at the onset, that dopamine rush only arrives after the task is entirely completed. This means that right at the starting line, your brain is literally being starved of the very neurochemical it needs to turn the ignition key.
And layered right on top of that chemical mismatch is this cognitive process called episodic prospecting. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but it's really just your brain's ability to mentally time travel. It's how you simulate a future event so you can connect what you need to do today with the outcome you want tomorrow. When this ability is weak, especially when you combine it with an underlying fear of failure or judgment, the future feels completely disconnected from the present. Your self of tomorrow feels like a total stranger, so your present self just comfortably ignores the deadline and leaves that stranger to deal with the inevitable panic later.
Which brings us nicely to our third point, the temporal motivation theory.
This psychological disconnect gives us a classic mathematical explanation for our behavior. This theory basically calculates human drive, and it proves exactly why watching just one more hour of Netflix almost always beats out an important work deadline. Think of motivation like a fraction. On the top, you have your expectancy of success and the value you place on a task. These pull your drive up. But the bottom of that fraction, that's where our true enemies live. Your sensitivity to short-term rewards multiplied by the time delay until the result. If a deadline is weeks away and you are highly sensitive to immediate temptations, like, say, endlessly scrolling through social media, that bottom number just inflates out of control. It mathematically crushes your motivation down to absolute zero until the final possible minute.
But wait, here is a fascinating plot twist from the literature. Number 4, active procrastination. Because it turns out not all delay is the enemy. There is a massive, defining difference between passive procrastination and active procrastination. Passive procrastination is the one most of us suffer from. It's that destructive kind that leaves you completely paralyzed, intensely anxious, and unable to get things done. But get this, some highly successful people actually utilize active procrastination. They make a conscious, intentional decision to push their work right up to the absolute edge of a deadline. Why? Because they know that a rapidly approaching time limit is the exact spark they need to ignite their peak focus and creativity.
Yeah, purposeful delay actually brings some really surprising benefits to the table. By intentionally waiting, you're actually giving your subconscious mind time to incubate ideas and build creative strategies that you'd probably never discover if you just rushed in immediately. Plus, it allows you to clear the deck by tackling smaller, lingering tasks on your to-do list first. And finally, that immense pressure of a looming deadline, it essentially forces you into a flow state. You end up operating with this radical efficiency, stripping away all that perfectionism and time-wasting behavior simply because, well, you don't have a single second to spare.
Okay, let's talk solutions. Number 5, how to actually overcome this.
So what if you're stuck in that passive, paralyzing kind of procrastination? Understanding the science is great, but we really need some actionable solutions here. The absolute best tactic to start with is the 5-minute rule. It's a cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy, and the secret to its power is how perfectly it dismantles psychological friction. Look, you don't have to promise yourself that you're going to finish a massive, intimidating project. That's way too overwhelming. Instead, you only commit to enduring the task for exactly 5 uninterrupted minutes. That's it. Once you cross that initial hurdle of just starting, your brain naturally transitions out of an avoidance state and into an engaged state. Honestly, 9 times out of 10, once that 5-minute timer goes off, momentum has completely taken over and continuing feels way easier than stopping.
Next up is this brilliant psychological tactic developed by Dr. Fuchsia Sorois, future self-visualization. Remember that episodic prospecting problem we talked about earlier, where your future self feels like a total stranger? To fix that cognitive disconnect, you actually have to actively build empathy for the future you. Try closing your eyes and visualizing yourself 1 year from now, but specifically in the first person. Or, hey, maybe write a letter from your future self thanking your present self for putting in the work. Even just pausing for a second to genuinely ask yourself, man, how miserable am I going to feel tomorrow morning if I skip this right now, creates real, powerful empathy. When you actually care about your future well-being, the pull of instant gratification completely loses its grip.
So now that you know exactly what tricks your brain is playing on you, you have the power to override them. You know that procrastination isn't laziness. It's just a dopamine timing glitch, a psychological barrier, and a disconnect from your future. So I have a very direct challenge for you right now. Can you turn off this explainer, actually put your device down, set a timer for exactly 5 minutes, and just face that task you've been avoiding? I promise you, your future self is going to be incredibly grateful for the choice you make right this second. Go ahead, start.